So let's jump right back in, right from where we left off in the last one. And if we go back and scroll up, we can see each one of these images in particular that's coming through from this find all call. And this is just grabbing the source. If we want to see the available methods, we could do print the directory of I, right? So we could see what's actually I, what we could do with I. I'm going to go ahead and comment out these other things and just print the directory of I, or the module itself. These are all the different things that are built into every single one of these find all classes with Beautiful Soup. So you can see that there's a lot to it, right? In this case, we just went off of source. There is more to the stuff that we're just not going to get into, but basically the point here is we could grab source or the source image from all of those images, and that's what I'm going to leave it as, just like that. So now that we have these images, there's actually, well, one more step that we want to do, and that's actually save the images. So we want to save them locally. And the way I'm going to do that is, first of all, I want to make a folder inside of my project. So let's go into the desktop, into scrape, into 25, and we're going to make a new folder in here, and we're going to call it images. All right, so this is where we're currently in as far as terminal is concerned. Let's go ahead and exit out of terminal, and I'll just do pwd. If you're on Windows, you do dir, but pwd will give me the path of where I'm currently located. So if I wanted to know the path of the images, I would just add /images. So just /images after this, and that's where the image path would be. But there's a more robust way of doing this. The reason I'm bringing this up even is because that's where we're going to store these images. So let's go ahead and import OS. And what we're going to do down here is we're going to say current path equals to os.get cwd, current working directory. And then we're going to say new path equals to, and this is going to be os.path.join, and it's going to be current path. And then we're going to say images. And then we're going to get the file name. So some file name here. We'll fix this in just a second. So this is the path, and then we want to write whatever this path is. We want to actually get the image data, and then we want to save it inside of here. So we're going to have some sort of image response. We're going to have to get these images, because again, these are URLs. If we look here, let's actually print that out one more time. Let's do that again. Oops, let's jump into Python. We're going to have to run this whole thing again. That's okay. Going to go ahead and do that. We're going to have to run it again anyway. And notice that it opened up another browser. So I actually have two Firefox browsers open now, so I can actually close out the other one. That's one of the attributes of how this driver works. It's just going to open a whole nother project. But anyway, so now we've got this. We should be able to print out the images that we have. There's only a few of them. There's not that many images actually showing up because of how it actually worked out. I'll explain why this is happening in a second, and of course, in this video, we will actually solve that issue. So we've got all these different images, and they are actually URLs. So we can use request.get to actually open these images. Some of these images will not actually open because, well, stuff like this, these relative ones, I'm just not going to worry about those. I'm going to worry about ones that have a direct path to the particular image. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new image. What I want to do is actually iterate through all of the images in this list. So all of those URLs that we have, I want to iterate through all of these. So for img and images, we're going to say, first of all, we're going to get the file name from it, and I'll just do ospath.base name of the image. So this just gets the last part of it, so that's going to be like this right here. So that last part of the URL, that's what it's going to get. Or in these cases, it would be something like that, or like that. We'll see that in a second. So that's how this part works, and I just called it file name. And now what I want to do is I want to get a image response. So I actually want to open up these images. So these URLs I actually want to open by doing request.get, and we're going to go ahead and get that image. That's right there. Cool, so that actually grabs that image, opens it up for us, and since we have our paths, we can actually go ahead and cut this out, paste this here. We've got our current path. Current path doesn't actually have to be in the iteration, so we can move that out. So we're going to go current path, images, and then file name. So file name. this is our new path. This is where we want to store this image, right? And we have the image opened and where we want to store it. So now we actually have to store it. And it's really simple. We just do with open, and we'll say new path, and I'll do WB. I'll explain that in a second. And we'll call it as output underscore file. And this is where we actually want to store this file. We want to copy the data from our actual request, and then we want to store it in here using this new path. So we have to import another one called shutil. So we're going to go and import shutil. This is a utility function that's built into Python that will allow us to do something like this, which is copy path. So shutil.copy file obj, or copy file object, and we'll do image underscore r dot raw, and we'll do output file. And then after that, we'll just delete the image r. So we'll delete the request, basically. And that should do it. That's it. That's all we actually need to do to scrape the images itself. So let's talk about these things here for a second. What we see is WB here. So what is WB? Well, if we go back to our Python cheat sheet guide that we have in the 30 Days of Python repository, and we scroll to the very bottom, we see that we have this write only in binary format, overwrites existing file or creates a new file. That's what we want. We want to overwrite it in the binary format because we are getting the raw data from the image itself. So this is actually grabbing that binary data and it's going to output it to that specific file. That's all it's doing. So it's like, let's go through it again. What we're doing is we're opening the Firefox web browser. We're going to get that URL. We're going to run this script, this JavaScript, to make sure that we get all of that URL. Then we're going to parse that data down to being all the images that we want. We're going to get all of those URLs. So we're going to take the URLs out of those images and put it into a new list. Inside of that list, we are then going to run through the list and actually get those files, save it into a folder called images in our current working path, and then we're going to save it with the original file name as we have here. And then we are going to run a request to open up that file. We're going to get the binary data there. We're going to copy that binary data to our new file, our new path that is, and then we're going to delete that original request. All right, or the original response that was there. So let's go ahead and try this one out right here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have all the imports in my shell, and now I do. So I'm going to go ahead and run this right here, and let's see what happens. It does load a little bit, and notice that we've got this little error from our URL here. So that's going to be something we're going to have to overcome a little bit. But if we actually jump into our project, we see an image was actually downloaded. So an image was actually here. It doesn't look great, and there's a reason for it, but basically, or it's just the actual loader, right? So that's all it's showing is the actual loader. Basically, the reason this is happening is because we didn't give it enough time. And also, the reason that we get that error is because we should just put this into a try block. So what I'm going to do now is just put this into a try block and do accept pass. The reason I'm doing this try block is to just ignore errors like this. That is what we meant. We meant to have the URL in front of it, but I don't want to have to go through everything here. I really just want to be able to get those URLs and open them up. So let's try that again with this. And we're going to come in here, run those through, and it's going to run through whatever we had. And in this case, we only get 2 images, and they're both loading images. Okay, so why is this happening? Well, the reason this is happening is because it opens up the page, but it doesn't really take time to completely load the page. So what I want to do is actually do several iterations of this. I want to give it some time to actually run this function. All right, so to do this, I need to import something else, which is time. So import time, and we're going to use a method called time.sleep. So instead of just running this randomly, I'm going to put iterations here. So iterations equals to 0. And I'll say while iterations is less than 10. Remember the while loop, remember the conditionals, remember all that stuff. I want to make sure I break the iterations. So I'll do iterations plus equals to 1. And then I'll do time.sleep. And I'll give it however many seconds I want it to sleep. In this case, I'll give it 10 seconds. That's a lot, actually, so let's go back to 5 seconds. All right, so while those iterations are true, now I want to go ahead and do this. In fact, I'm going to want to do all of it, right? I'm actually going to want to get the HTML. I'm going to want to execute this script, right? I don't need to actually run it again, but I want to execute this script every single time. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of this stuff out with the exception of the URL and put it in this while loop because, again, we want these to be executed every time. So this iterations, it's gonna go through. We'll see what this does in just a second. I'm gonna get rid of all the extra spaces because copying and pasting inside of the Python shell is a little mad when you have too many spaces. So what's going to happen here is Python's going to read this. It's going to see this while loop, so it's going to know that it's going to run this while loop several times given the condition here. And all of this stuff is things that we already did, but now it's going to run it based off of a different time. So we're going to give it some more time than just the time it takes to run the iteration. So let's go ahead and do this. And we might have to import time. Yes, we do. So let's import time. And let's paste that again. And now it's going to run through these iterations. It's going to be like every few seconds, it's going to do this whole thing. It's going to take longer than every few seconds, but what we should start seeing is more images actually popping up inside of our images directory, and it looks to be the case that it actually is populating us with some more images. Looks like the images are loading. I'm going to let this happen for just a minute, and we'll come back and make sure that everything is working as we intended. Okay, so it's still loading, but there's a critical piece that's actually missing that I did not actually add. And that is why we're seeing this loading sign. I thought it was the loading sign because, like, sometimes websites actually have a loading thing going through like that, but then I realized JPEGs don't do that. Only PNGs do. PNGs can actually do this, or excuse me, GIFs can do this, like actual movement, where PNGs and JPEGs cannot. So the problem is actually right here. We need to add one more thing and say stream equals to true here. That is going to make all the difference in what we just ran. So I'm going to go ahead and close out I'm going to actually exit out of Python now, clear everything out, go into Python again, and let's just copy and paste all this stuff one more time. And it's going to take a second. It's going to open up the driver again, and it's now going to actually go through all of those images, and it's going to run through the iterations as we expect. So the original one without that while loop still would work, and now this time the image should actually show up, and it is because we added that stream. But if you notice, these images they're gorgeous, for one, because the photographer is amazing, but they actually are the images. They actually are pulling from his website, and it's going through with the iterations. As you see here, it's going to add on to these images in a different way, right? It's actually giving us the URLs, very nice, very clean images, and it's pulling it. So we've officially scraped using JavaScript for any particular page that's something like this. So if we go to a different URL, like stills/adventure, and change that to being here, copy and paste everything here. Let's just close out the other one, and we run that. It's going to give it a second to actually do it. It's going to now then run through all of these, where it's going to now give us probably some more images that just weren't originally there. And as we see, there they are. There they go. They start to load, and it's just a ton more images. Now, this is scraping. The main part here is getting those URLs. It's not so much getting the scraping of images, right? I just wanted to show you that because these are so visually appealing. They're really, really cool. There is something that is made for image scraping, and that is the Python image scraper. You can actually run the scraper like this. Notice it says image scraper, and then you just grab any particular URL. So instead of what we currently did, we could do it this way, where it's grabbing any particular URL. The only challenge here, again, is with the driver. You want to make sure that you would still be using the driver, because regardless of whether or not you have a URL, this might not work every single time. But what we just showed you is exactly how you do it on something that's running and loading with JavaScript. All right, guys, I know this was a really long one. I wanted to make sure that we got it all into one day. We definitely covered a lot, but really when it comes down to it, it's actually pretty simple. As you see these lines of code, what we've done here is really just not a whole lot different than what we've already done up until this point, and that's why I wanted to cover all of it now. But the main thing is running that driver, making that being the actual driver. That's what's keeping that connection open for us, and then it goes through here and actually runs the script as we need. Notice this execute script doesn't have to reload the URL. It just reruns this execute script based off of what's going on the page, right? So we could run this pretty much at any time, and we don't necessarily always have to run all of this stuff, because if the document didn't change or something, we could do all sorts of things to make this a little bit more efficient. But the main part here is to be able to actually run this sort of function on your own so you can find and build things that are running off of JavaScript. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys don't have too many questions on this one. Of course, all of this code is going to be available on our GitHub. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.